Okay, in this lesson, we're going to take a look at some other modifiers other than the clump modifiers. So the file we're in is identical to the one we finished out with. It's called Lesson 13 Begin. So the clumpings, as I mentioned, no matter what we add after them, are always going to be first. Now you can reorder right over here. However, again, clumping is always calculated first, so those don't matter. However, anything else we add now will matter. So whether we add something like a coil effect first, a noise, or cut will make a difference. For example, if I add noise and make all of the hairs noisy, then when I go and cut them, it'll basically cut them right down, along the noise. You'll have maybe just these little beginnings over here. On the other hand, if I cut first, the noise will be applied to the new cut hairs, so you'll have the same frequency of noise in both the short and the long. So it will make a difference, but again, it's easy enough just to switch them around here if you want to see how they look in a different order. So for starters, I'm going to go ahead and add in probably my cut effect. So what the cut effect does is shorten hairs, and it does it through a random expression. So we'll go ahead and maybe look at this area here, and I might change my background color to black so it's a little easier to see. So it's actually shortening each hair even within the clump. Now you can see it's currently using a mask of 1.0. Again, you can add a map in here if you'd like, so certain areas aren't cut, or maybe are cut more. And the actual amount, instead of just giving us an overall amount, which would just have them all cut down or not, it's using a random expression. So it can basically be cut as little as nothing or as much as 0.2 units. So if I increase this to maybe 0.7 here, you can see some hairs get significantly shorter now. And this is nice just to add more variety to our fur. It just kind of gives more change in the fur. Hairs look like they're not all mechanically created. So I don't want too much cut. In fact, a cut of about 0.2 is probably just fine. It creates just enough variety inside of them for me. Okay. You can also keep it parameterized or reparameterized. Again, that's just whether it's using the existing face density or not. So you can see there's not a huge difference in there. The parameterized ones tend to be a little shorter. Excuse me. We'll keep probably the original parameterization. You can also change, the minimum random, so some of them can be cut as well. So now everything kind of gets shortened overall. And we can even try a negative number in here. There we go. And some hairs actually get longer now. So you can see we got a few of them kind of gaining there. Now they don't actually increase, it's just based on whatever the original was. But still an interesting way to kind of randomize in there. I'm going to go ahead and put it back to 0. And maybe we'll try to, well, we'll do 3. A little more randomization in there. So that's our cut effect. We can also add in a noise effect right there. Give that a moment. And you can see that begins to add randomization to the hairs, based on rotation and scale. And again, it looks really good just kind of starting off there. You can see the great quality to the fur. We can, of course, make changes, though. Again, you have your mask. We also have a frequency and an overall magnitude. And by default, you could see it only affects the tips, which is typically what we want for hair and fur. We also have the ability to preserve the original length if you don't want them to get any shorter. So maybe I put this at about 75, so it actually preserves that length a bit. Now that's also true for making it any longer as well. So correlation, again, just matches the noise across the surface. Let's say I put this to about 5. There we go. So it kind of created at least a little bit of continuity in there. And I think I'm going to go ahead and maybe, let's try a higher frequency, 0.5. Wait, or rather 5, and then 0.5. Looks okay. Actually, let's try 1.5. It's not bad. It's a bit much. I can also increase the overall magnitude, which is kind of the strength of the existing effect. We can also decrease that a bit. We can try turning this on and off, just seeing what the effect looks like. And that doesn't look too bad. I kind of like the little bit of noise that we're getting in there. Just adding enough variety to the hair. Okay, and again, you can switch these around. We can always go ahead and say that this cut moves above the noise there. Let's go ahead and rebuild that. And it gives us a slightly different effect. It's actually not that different at all. Again, it's, we're only cutting 0.3 units of each hair, so it's virtually the same effect, just a slight different noise on the shorter hairs now. So those are kind of the big ones we generally use. There are other ones here. We can add in, for example, our coil, just kind of like a twist on the fur. There we go. Now it's going to look like a complete nightmare for starters there, so we're going to go ahead and turn this down quite a bit. Let's actually start by bringing the count down. We'll bring the count to 0 over here. Okay, and we'll slowly bring this count down over here. Actually, it looks like these might start from 0.5 now that I think about it. A lot of these twisting ones do. Yep, looks like that's probably where it's starting from. So we'll give it just a little bit of curl or coil right there. And now we can go ahead and decrease the overall count here. Let's try 0.1. So it kind of gives each hair almost a slight twist. And I'm probably going to bring my mask way down. There we go. Now, what I don't really like about this one so much is it does give you kind of a very regular pattern, because if each hair is, of course, twisting the same direction, you're typically going to see that. Now, you can adjust the overall radius of that coil size, and that can help eliminate at least a little bit of that effect. You can see it's gotten a little bit nicer. Still not great. And we can change the overall size here down, say to 0.1. That's not too bad now, but that's because we've eliminated most of the effect. So, yeah, let's say it's a pretty slight change. So it's actually not too bad. Maybe we'll try 0.4 on the radius. There we go, and that's added just a little bit of twist to the fur, but again, a little bit of regularity there now. I'm probably going to choose not to keep my coil. I'm going to go ahead and just right-click and say delete. Okay, give that a second to update. So I think I'm relatively happy with what I have. Again, I could continue going and adding more. A lot of these are exactly how they look. This one, for example, the mesh cut. If you have a mesh in place, you can actually use it to kind of cut out a certain part of the fur. Debugging isn't really an effect. It's so much just, it's going to give you information for debugging purposes. We can also affect things based on collisions and things like that as well. We will use some of these later on, such as wind and animated wires, in order to add dynamics to the fur later as well. For now, though, I think we're okay with what we have. So we are pretty much done with our modifiers. Now, I do probably want to go back now and make some last changes in my groom, just to kind of adjust the arms and things like that. But again, for the most part, we're pretty much good to go. Also, one cool thing you could do to kind of, get a better idea of how your fur lays is feel free to add in a light. Now, we're going to go ahead and talk more about lights later and how we light fur, but just adding a basic spotlight could do quite a bit just for viewing in the Viewport 2.0. So we can go ahead and, for example, add in that light there. We'll turn on lights over here. You can see it does light the fur, but then what we can do is actually turn on shadows. And you can see it does, in fact, light that fur. I can also turn on ambient occlusion. You can see that affects the fur a bit too. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my blue background. You can also view this inside of tube shade mode. Let's go ahead and turn that on. There we go. Up close, you can see the tubes actually get much better shadows. You can see every single hair is actually being shaded. But again, from far away, it can be a little bit much. So typically going to leave that off when I'm previewing. So I think I'm going to go ahead and probably end this lesson here. And in the next lesson, we'll do just a tiny bit more grooming just to kind of clean and fix things up before we move on to things like color, animation, so on and so forth. So I'll see you guys in the next lesson.